There comes a time when the business is successful and it's time to add a layer of leadership because the owner can't do everything and he has to offload responsibilities to people that he trusts. At that point, let's just say you need an operations manager. Well, you can go outside and look for a trained operations manager, but very likely that person comes from a larger organization. When you bring them into that small company, they're trained to do 1, 2, or 3 things a day and do them repetitively and do them well. In a small company, you're doing 8 to 10 things a day. It's a chaotic situation. People are working long hours. They're having a ball, but for an outsider to come into that kind of an organization doesn't work. And then from the other side, the employees who have given you their all for several years kind of wonder why it is that when it came time for a big promotion, somebody else got it. Somebody from the outside got it.
Welcome, everyone. This and today is Unfiltered Conversations. I am honored to welcome one of our esteemed guests, Rich Ashton, a 40-plus year entrepreneur, culture builder, author of Growing Your Own, a practical leadership playbook guide for real-world experiences. Rich spent decades cultivating leaders from within, creating value and driving teams and transforming small business with intention and leadership. Get ready for a candid conversation on how to grow people, not just the business, but people centered and oriented. Rich, thank you so much for being here. Appreciate you.
I like that introduction. I appreciate that. I think you nailed everything. Glad to be here.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Looking back on the 45 years in business, what is I'll say, the moment or relationships that shaped your leadership journey today?
I actually, before I was an entrepreneur in small business, I worked for a large company, a real estate development company out of Dallas. And I was so fortunate to get my start there because I worked for a
Amen.
visionary leader who understood people and had built a culture, despite the fact that he had a large company. He had built a culture that was very, very special, built on integrity and built on people development. He had that belied his level of success. And he was a man that was so easy to listen to. He was full of wisdom, and he built an organization around that. And so he attracted really smart, really hardworking people into that environment. And I was just a young guy, kind of got in through the back door, and it it was the best launching pad for my career I ever could have had.
So, how long did you stay there at that company?
I stayed there 10 years. I worked at an affiliate company for the first 5 years and then was given an opportunity to become a partner in the company. Obviously, I took that. And so I spent 5 years as an operating partner developing industrial properties in Tarrant County, which is west of Dallas. And then I decided that real estate was not my passion.
Mm.
And I really had always wanted to be in business for myself. So I sold my interest back to my partners and went out on my own.
Oh, man. I noticed in your book, you talked about the leadership gap in small businesses. And as you got on your own, I know you've seen that even more vividly. What patterns did you see early on that kept emerging?
I have seen it over and over again, and it's true in small businesses. Small businesses are so much fun, but they're so hectic. And the founder generally starts out, maybe himself, maybe 1 or 2 others. There comes a time when the business is successful and it's time to add a layer of leadership because the owner can't do everything and he has to offload responsibilities to people that he trusts. At that point, let's just say you need an operations manager. Well, you can go outside and look for a trained operations manager, but very likely that person comes from a larger organization. When you bring them into that small company, they're trained to do 1, 2, or 3 things a day and do them repetitively and do them well. In a small company, you're doing 8 to 10 things a day. It's a chaotic situation. People are working long hours. They're having a ball because it's exciting. But for an outsider to come into that kind of an organization often doesn't work. And then from the other side, the employees who have given you their all for several years kind of wonder why it is that when it came time for a big promotion, somebody else got it. Somebody from the outside got it. But if you promote your existing employees, you run into a roadblock in that you haven't had time to train them to become leaders. They're great at what they do, but they probably don't have leadership skills. And so you promote them, they fail, and you lose a great employee. So I face that, and I watch people face it all the time. It's as common a dilemma in small business as there is.
So is that like the aha moment when it comes to building that internal leadership program when it comes to small businesses?
The aha moment for me was that if I was going to be able to retire one day, because I did not really want to sell the company to a bunch of outsiders, I wanted to reward the employees, but I didn't have a leadership team in place. The aha moment for me was, if I'm going to do this on my timetable, I'd better get started. And I really like the idea of promoting the people that I know, the people who have our values, the people who are used to this business and who are all churning along in the same direction. Those are the kind of people that I want to leave this business to. And so I began to begin training program with the idea that one day I'd be able to step out.
So that's very, very, very pivotal and instrumental because a lot of times in businesses, what I've seen, especially with small businesses, as they build up, they enjoy it, they enjoy the ride, and then usually when they're preparing their company to be bought out by a larger corporation, a lot of times, and a lot of times those larger corporations that come in, they're not really taking care of the employees that have been there from day one. How do you feel when it comes to having a small business, growing that leadership program, and also having those employees, I guess, take more, I guess, of an active role into leading the company? But you said, like you said, you were saying like a lot of times they're not prepared. So I noticed, especially in your book, you have like it's almost like you don't say it directly, but it's like you give them room to fail, if that makes sense, you know. And so it's like how do you know, well, okay, like this person doesn't have this skill yet, but as I give them this, I'm gonna give them room to grow and expand. How does that work?
I use a simple project or a simple program of delegating responsibility. And I think if you delegate small tasks,
Uh-huh.
they work like a test. And if the employee, they don't have to succeed 100%, but if they show signs that they can take that responsibility and do something with it, then it's time to give them more. So it's very incremental. I had a lot of time to go ahead and do this. I didn't have to accomplish this in 18 months. In fact, the program started 10 years before it completed, but I kind of screwed it up the first time. I tried to train employees to be like me and think like me, and I didn't need entrepreneurs, I needed leaders. So I retooled it and started over, and then we got it right. We started with 8 people in our leadership program. 6 of them became the leaders who actually took over the company. I This is a very current topic because I retired about 25 days ago.
Wow.
I now am I'm still in a chairman's role, but I'm not even in the office anymore. Out of the office, and it's on them now. And they got there by a little bit at a time. They didn't grab it all the first time. And we had some fits and starts and some failures and some tears and some successes, and here we are.
You know, it's amazing because you cultivate leaders, right? And it seems like you take a by step, a tier approach, especially when it comes to raising leaders. In this type of environment nowadays where everybody wants it like that, they want to be the leader, they want to have the corner office. What do you say to those individuals that go into these corporations, big or small, that they should focus on first?
The reason that I went ahead and published the book about this is because my approach is very, very fundamental. I run blue collar companies, and so my people have very little leadership training. I wanted to be able to take them on a very slow pace, but in some cases, these are people who never even thought that they would become leaders. Certainly not have a chance to be the top leaders in a company. To use an example, we have a lot of service technicians, and a service technician might say, one day when I can't do this any longer physically, I'd like to move into a leadership role, but they don't have any idea what that means. And so when I wrote the book, I used 35 leadership principles that we've used in our business. explain each one of them. The chapters are very short, they're 2.5 pages long, so that even someone who isn't in any kind of a leadership role now can read this and go, this is what leadership really looks like. And maybe I'm running a small team, maybe I'm running a nonprofit. My approach probably doesn't work in a real big company. I'm used to running small teams and small organizations. So it's written with that in mind. But I find that everybody who reads the book goes, wow, this is something I'm going to keep on my desk, and I'm going to refer back to chapter 7 or chapter 14 because you dealt with something that I deal with every single day. And so that's my recommendation, not necessarily read my book, but start slow. If you don't know what you're talking about in leadership, there's a lot to it. There's just so much that happens every day in the life of a leader, and you need a guide.
And I do think what you're saying in your playbook is applicable to small business, but also mid tier and large businesses. Because I just think about my father when I was reading through your playbook about my father, who he always worked with his hands, blue collar guy. He worked at I'm not sure if you knew the company back in the day in Florida. It was called Wholesome Bakery. He worked as one of their maintenance technicians, making sure all the machines for the bakery was working well for 17 years before they eventually closed down. And then he ended up working for Coca-Cola in their manufacturing department, working with his hands off on unloading and offloading merchandise and different things of that nature. So he's always been like a blue collar guy. And I wonder if he had this playbook, what type of, insight would that give him so he can be a better leader and to cultivate himself, right? So I would say my question is to you is how do you define leadership readiness and what signals do you use to assess your employees who are in those blue collar positions who might not think their, I guess, leader attributes are there yet?
Again, I use delegation as a test. If I see a spark in somebody, or if they come to me and say, Rich, what do I need to do to move up in the organization? Then there's always something that you can delegate to them and say, let's just do this special project and let's see how you do. Here are my expectations. Here's the timeline. Come to me for advice. I'm not going to tell you what the answer is, but come to me and let's work through this together. And you get a really good idea right off the bat off of a single interaction like that. Some people go, some people you don't hear from again. It's really funny. I've had two or three of those who never came back, and they continued to work, but they didn't like the challenge.
Hmm.
Others come back, and they don't do so well. So you assess where they missed
The mark.
the idea. If there's enough left, you finish that project and then you give them something a little tougher. They generally will tell you whether they're interested in biting off on this. I try to be so low key with them, but I'm also pretty demanding and I'm results oriented. And if you fail because you didn't try, that's not a very pleasant conversation. Fail because you just didn't fully understand it. That's on me. I didn't do a good job of explaining it. So we go back and we'll try again. I love to see that spark. And I love to see people go ahead and take the bit and start to run with it. One of the things that we do early on with a young leader is because most of them have not seen themselves in leadership roles, we talk about what's holding them back. And all of us have limitations. Life has a way of teaching us what we can't do. Maybe it's the way we were raised, maybe it's just being mistreated in business, maybe there's an emotional problem that developed over the years, maybe it's just fear. But once I can identify what it is that is creating a ceiling on your performance, then we can attack that ceiling. And so the training that I've always done, and again, you have the luxury in small business of dealing with individual people and pouring a lot into them. That's what I really like to do. That's what was done with me in my first company. So I really like attacking those ceilings and trying to help people break through. Not everybody can, not everybody really wants to. It's hard work. But boy, when it happens, it's really fun. We've had lots of those kinds of breakthroughs.
You know, can you share a story? Maybe you can, or maybe you can't, but can you share a story with someone who kind of surprised you by stepping into a leadership role in a way that you really didn't expect?
Sure. I have one I love to, or have several I love to tell, but I'll tell you about a lady who came to us. um, as in a dispatcher role, she was so closed off. And I'm a believer that I should have a relationship, a unique relationship with every employee, just like I do with my friends and family and all. I want to connect with you on a specific thing that when you and I talk, we're not having the same conversation I had with the person next to you. That it's unique to us, and I find that that builds a depth of relationship that is really beneficial for both of us. I couldn't break through with this lady, and it took a year. And I kept coming back because I'll walk around the company every day and interact with all the employees. And one day, she, for whatever reason, and she knows I have grandkids and I'm interested in the kids' sports. And she told me a story that her son had been on the football field and she didn't like a referee's call. And she had kind of gone off on the referee. And she was ashamed of herself, but laughing about it. And I said, "Been there, done that. I know exactly what you're talking about." And that was the day we broke through. And not
Yeah.
only did our relationship begin to develop, but it unlocked something in her and she began to open up with other employees. Well, she became a supervisor. And I
Mm.
would have told you in the first year of her employment, there wasn't a chance in the world that she was ever going to get out of her way and move up in the organization. And not only is she a supervisor, she's really good at it. Yeah, those are the stories that make it worth it. I love telling those stories.
Man, see, that's pretty awesome. That is so awesome. Man. So I would say your development when you work for that phenomenal leader when you first came in, why do you think that worked? Where I guess as a CEO, he went and had the wherewithal to go and talk and made people feel more comfortable when he had those conversations with them. What is that? What is relationship? I guess I guess what I'm trying to ask is, does relationship equal execution, or is it, I guess, how do we quantify building relationship with people and building a great business?
Well, I would say it's foundational. The relationships are foundational. So the first rule of being a leader is you're a leader because you want to influence people.
Mm,
How better to influence people but to have a relationship with them? So if I know a little bit about you and I know a little bit about your kids and I know what makes you tick, I'm just that much more influential in your life. And you are influential in my life as well because I've given you the keys. Now, in a larger organization, the HR department's going to tell you, you don't get to have those kinds of relationships. That's out of bounds. But in a small company, you get to bend those rules. And you have to be very careful. If you're a good leader, people don't push those boundaries. They don't take the relationship as the same thing as, say, an outside work friendship. Being friendly doesn't necessarily equate to, to a friendship. But if I show a true interest in you, if I ask not only what your kids' names are and oh they had a birthday, but if I know your daughter plays the flute and I ask you one day, she was taking those lessons. Did she make her way into the orchestra? You see me differently because I genuinely showed interest to you.
yeah.
If I go visit you in the hospital when you get sick, you're shocked, but you also know that Rich, I mean, he cares about me. Well, I do care about our employees, just like I care about everybody in my life. So I think that's the foundation. We're a business who believes in values like integrity and honesty and doing things exceptionally. So if I am transparent with employees and they see that I live my life that way, then they are far more likely to follow me down that path of integrity.
Um,
Other hand, if I preach one thing in the office and act another way outside the office, I'll lose them in a heartbeat. So I think it's really, it just works for me. Not everybody operates the same way, but I've seen an awful lot of people operate this way successfully.
so wow, that's amazing. In your book, you describe common sense advice. You say you're just giving common sense advice, and especially this day and age, I don't think it's just as common as you might think. And it's always, we talk about those common practices. What are some principles you think most leaders kind of overlook, especially when they're developing their chops, especially with their employees?
Well, the number one thing I would say is accountability, and everybody talks about accountability. I like to use the book Extreme Ownership as the example of accountability. You're nodding your head like you've read the book. It's a fantastic book written by two Navy SEALs.
Yep.
They use a principle, then they illustrate it with a combated example, and then a business example. So it's very easy to understand. But in the military, accountability means if I screw up, somebody's going to lose their life. Now, that's a level of accountability that you don't deal with in business. But if you acknowledge that that's what real accountability is, then you hold yourself accountable in a different way. One of the things that young leaders don't understand is that the level of accountability in your life as you become a leader goes up. It doesn't go down. It's not that you're holding others accountable, it's that you're holding yourself accountable to a higher standard. And then the second one would be proactivity. Managers, leaders who are fearful and don't move forward and make decisions. An employee comes to them and says, I've got this problem. And you say, I'll do something about it. And then you do nothing about it. You lose the right to lead those people. They know you're not going to do anything. So they don't pay any attention. And then the last one that I'll mention here is the pursuit of intellectual curiosity. And that's a big one. It was a gigantic one for me. When I came into that first company that I told you about, I was one of the few people that didn't have an MBA. I also didn't have a college degree because I dropped out of college after 2 years. And so here I was, fresh out of the Navy with really, really smart people. And I didn't know anything about business. Fortunately, my boss, who was a 24-year-old or 23-year-old Harvard MBA, pulled me aside real early and he said, Rich, you don't know much about what we're doing here, do you? And I said, I honestly don't. And he said, I want you to read 5 business periodicals a week, and I want you to read the Wall Street Journal every single day. And fortunately, I followed his advice. I continue that program today. It's broadened to where I read on a whole lot of topics. But I have found particularly in the blue collar industries, intellectual curiosity is not a topic that most people are familiar with. And if they'll spend their leisure time doing lots of things other than gaining knowledge, if they were spending even 10 minutes a day legitimately pursuing intellectual curiosity and pursuing knowledge, they'd be shocked at how soon their knowledge has broadened to the point where it's really useful. And on a very basic leadership level, the more I know, the better leader I am.
You're right. You're not wrong. Man. What is I would say, you gave principles that I guess three that we utilize. Can those three be I guess transcended through any virtual industry in business?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. Yeah, they can. They apply just like extreme ownership says. I mean, those are all things that are covered in extreme ownership and they're true at any size organization.
Yeah.
And they're true in parenting too, to be honest with you.
Yeah, you're not right. That man, you know what? This has been a very interesting conversation because you're straight up, you're, just upfront. The way your playbook is written is just so simplistic. And I love everything about it. I'm sorry. I like to give you your flowers and your kudos.
Well, I appreciate but basically I'm a simple guy. If it required a lot of theory, I wouldn't be very good at it.
Yeah, I will give you that. I will give you that. And for you to retire and now, what I'm saying, just gave up the reins, was that something that was very scary for you to be like, I know you probably like, and I know I have some great leaders, but at the same time, I know like, I was always told from great leaders that advise me to this day, they say, hey, Mike, watch out for your pride, watch out for your ego, because your ego will make you think you're, irreplaceable and really you're not. So for you to get to that point where you're like, okay, I've done what I have done for this company, I'm a step back. That was a quite of a, I guess, of a hit to your ego to be like, this is not all about me. Now it's time for them, like you even said earlier, to step up in the fray. What made you want to do that?
I have had a wonderful time in business, and virtually every day I jumped out of bed and I couldn't wait to go to the office.
Mm,
As this progressed and I was offloading more and more responsibilities, I had less and less to do every day. And I
mm,
didn't really like that. But I'd gone down that road, and I'm much older than the average retiree. So I'm 76, and I'm long past the time that most people retire, but I was having so much fun, I didn't really want to leave. But I told my wife about a year ago, one day I said, if I didn't have to go in, I don't think I'd go in today. And she said, in 44 years, I've never heard you say that. And I said, we're getting close to the time. So I worked through a general manager who does a really nice job running the company now. I stayed in the building with him for a year, letting him run the company, but having me be there physically.
Mhm.
And then just, 3 weeks ago, I actually moved out of the company, and it was a very comfortable move.
Yeah.
Fortunately, because I have written the book, I'm doing a lot of marketing for the book. I'm doing podcasts and things like that. So I'm really busy now. And if I hadn't had that to go to, this would have been a very different experience. You can only play so much golf. And so this has been very, very seamless. And I never had that weird feeling. And so, it's been great.
You know, you having this playbook, building up leaders. What, I guess, if you can tell us a story like, or just one pitfall, what's like the biggest mistake small business owners that you have seen make when they promote great employees into a leadership position? And how can they avoid it?
That's a hard question. It's an easy question to answer. It's a hard question to solve. And the reason is that you're so busy in a small business, particularly when the business is very small,
Hmm.
that the last priority you have is training the next level of leaders. And that's one of the reasons I hate to keep pushing the book, but that's one of the reasons the book is just an easy bridge for that. I had the luxury of working through a general manager, which gave me the time to do things like put this training course together. If I hadn't had that, I would not have had time to do it, just like every other small business owner. It's a flaw, but I'm not sure it's a curable flaw. You just have to look for a way to bridge the gap.
Okay. You emphasize integrity and culture a lot, especially in the playbook, and just having this conversation with you. How do leaders actually teach those values instead of just talking about them?
Well, they better have them first. That's number one. I've seen a lot of people talk about culture and not act about it. But we say that customer is certainly number one, but our employees are a close second. I've always thought that if I expect the employees to provide exceptional customer service to our customers, then I'd better be providing exceptional service to them. And so we do a lot of things to reward our employees, to make them feel special, just the building relationships. I'm not the only one in the company that builds relationships with subordinates. That's is a behavior that has been modeled throughout the company. So when you work at our company, you feel special and you look forward to coming in. We like to communicate some with spouses. I'm a big note sender. And so I'll write a personal note to the wife of a technician who's done something special, knowing that he doesn't expect me to send something to her. She doesn't expect to get a letter from me at home. And when she opens it, I've had probably not hundreds, but many, many stories of wives breaking into tears when they saw such nice comments about their husbands.
Oh, wow.
Um, or congratulating a child on the graduation from high school or something like that. The culture thing is much deeper than most business owners think it is. And as a result of that, we tend to keep people in our company far longer than most companies like ours do.
Yeah. And see, and that's pretty amazing, especially nowadays. I was reading a lot about burnout, especially when it comes to mid-tier and large corporations and how they keep employees maybe 12 months to 18 months at the most, because a lot of people are just, they don't feel valued. And one thing coming across your book, it's not that it seems you make people feel valued in your companies. And I feel like small business is the way to go when it comes to having a business and not turning it into something that I guess you can't keep your hand on. But as a small business owner, do you just like the rush, or do you like, I guess, that you can actually affect change in such a strategic way?
I love the idea. One of the reasons I got out of the real estate business was because the decisions that you make in the real estate business take so long. When you think about building a building, it's going to be a minimum of 18 months until you actually can see that building and lease that building and do those kinds of things. I need much quicker rewards. And so
Yeah.
I say in the book, I find the idea that I could make a decision in the morning and see results in the afternoon. I think
Okay.
that's exhilarating. And so I love seeing the effects of my decisions in my leadership.
Heck yeah. Well, Rich, thank you so much for being on the show. If anything else you want to add, here's your moment. Guys, please listen up.
I can't add anything to what I said. Really, I do believe in the book. That's an egotistical thing to say. The website for the book is growingyourown.net. If you'd like to talk to me individually, I'm available at rich@growingyourown.net. And I have time on my hands and a great desire to continue impacting employees and small business leaders.
Mm. Rich, I would love to stay in contact with you because you are an amazing leader. You're basically what I need as a coach, a mentor, someone, especially as I build up my small business as well. So I appreciate your time. I appreciate you. Guys, go to his website, get the playbook. It is dynamic. It's something that you need as an entrepreneur, especially in this digital age, with having employees remotely and also close together. It's going to change the way you look at leadership and the way you value your company. So, again, Rich, thank you so much for being on the show. Appreciate you.
Hey, I loved being here. Thank you very much, Michael.